Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. For the first time at Davos, female executives from the 5 major ethnic groups in North America took the stage to launch the first annual Inclusion at Work annual reports. The groundbreaking reports for inclusion practitioners, executive leadership, and board directors were pre-released alongside the World Economic Forum on January 19th. The formal launch for the Black and Silicon Valley Worker Studies is or was Monday, January 30th, 2023, just yesterday. So the 2023 Inclusion at Work annual reports were conducted by Posters, Prisca, Momentive, and AAPI Data and organized by Dr. Karthik, and I'm going to say the name right, y'all, Ramakrishnan and Dr. Peelin Kesaber. Here to discuss is the author, journalist, documentary, and filmmaker, Richard Lui. See, I said it wrong. Richard Lui. And he's not going to correct me.
No, that's right. It's Louis. That's Louis. You got
Louis.
it. Yeah.
I was waiting for the correction. And Elle Arlook, the head of equity and justice for the study's lead partner, APCO. Good morning, and thank you for joining the Black Press of America.
It's great to be here.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so listen, let's jump right into this. Elle, Richard, 7 annual reports. Talk about the reports, and they're being released with so much data. Why is this important, especially now?
Go for it,
Richard,
Elle.
do you want to kick? Okay, all right. Well, we've seen quite a bit of data come out that really talks about, it kind of centers the employer in DEI, but we don't have a lot of data that really talks about it from the perspective of the employee and asks the difficult questions that might be more challenging for an employer to ask. And so by having a study that's done fully by third parties, we're able to ask those hard questions and get to the root of answers that will help DEI leaders continue to substantiate the need and the value of DEI programs, right? We saw a big influx of investment in DEI over the past 5 years, really spurred by the Black Lives Matter movement. And unfortunately, we're starting to see a decline. We're seeing people pull back on DEI hires. We're seeing it become more and more challenging to get investment in DEI programs. And so data that really values and substantiates the benefits and the ROI of DEI is critical now more than ever.
Yeah, and Richard, we hear a lot about DEI, and there's been a lot, as your colleague Elle was just saying, a lot of attention paid to it in the wake of the George Floyd's murder in 2020, and then it just dropped off.
Yeah.
So now you have this report. Do you think, are you confident that this will make some sort of difference?
Yeah, you know, Stacy, I'm just a member of the advisory panel, not the author, but I wish I could be. And the purpose, you hit it right on the head. You know, you and I both saw L2 after George Floyd. You know, as a journalist, I was like, how many more times am I going to tell the same story? 30 years ago, I was standing in the street telling the story of Rodney King. You know, and you know, we've been talking about Justin last week, another one with Tyree Nichols. And we knew that something was a little bit different in the last 3 years, that business was starting to say, we have an input to the way society functions in the streets, in the stores, in homes. And they started to do something. But we all know that over those periods of time in the last 3 years, we've seen it before. Our great civil rights leaders have seen it before. The door swings wide open, and what does it do after that?
Yeah,
it creeps slowly, and it closes. And so as a journalist, as a former business person, as a community volunteer for the last 15 years, very actively in all of our great communities of diversity, I knew that we needed to help those diversity champions, those inclusion champions that sit in every organization, but they feel like they're by themselves.
And so a lot of cases they are by themselves.
Right. So how could I lean in personally? So I joined the advisory panel and with Prisca, you know, said, okay, let's give them the data that they can take to the corner office. Let's give them the data that they can take to the boardroom, that they can take to their fellow executive leaders and say, let's not stop. Let's keep that door open as long as possible, because we know now that business has a role and wants to have a role.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Elle, you know, there's always these conversations and thoughts and prayers and things of that nature. But these reports, they promise real metrics, and real metrics is what's needed, right?
Absolutely. In the corporate environment, people are bound to metrics. They've got to show value for the programs that they want to invest in. And until now, it's been really hard to quantify the value of DEI programs, right? You know that they're the right thing to do ethically, but where are the numbers? Where is the data that says this is working for our people, for our culture, and for our bottom line? And so the data in this study really tries to pick away at that argument. Right? There's really powerful data here that talks about DEI and the need to be consistent, the need to create community, and the need to continuously communicate about your DEI initiatives. And it equates it to real value for an organization. There's really interesting data in this study around the high numbers of people that equate strong DEI programming to an actual tangible benefit akin to a salary raise, which is really interesting to see that people assign that much value to a strong DEI culture. There's also very powerful data around trust and respect that increases, nearly doubles for most communities when you have strong DEI programming. And there's very strong data around the value of ERGs, business resource groups, and that when companies have those, it nearly doubles the idea or the belief that your company is committed to DEI and is taking it seriously. So investing in these sorts of programs has a real benefit.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Elle and Richard, companies see they see that this really can benefit them. However, at the same time they seem so reluctant. It takes a George Floyd or a Tyree Nichols situation, and I'm pretty sure with this situation now still current, the Tyree Nichols, the horrific incident with Tyree Nichols, I'm pretty sure now we'll hear, because we got statements from corporations already coming in. We'll hear these statements of outrage and hear these statements that we need to do better. We need to have more diversity and inclusion. They treat it almost as if it's just a fad, but the numbers that Elle just talked about shows that it really benefits the company. So why the reluctance?
I got to say, I love the fact that you just said the word fad, Stacy, because when we were in Davos, we asked that question of so many different folks. And, when I'm out there and I'm talking with different business leaders, I asked that exact same question that you just asked. Is DEI a fad? Now, the answer is they give is no. But what is it that we feel? Right? What is it that people feel? Workers of color, what do they feel? What are those groups at work? What is actually the day-to-day sense of being? And to get to what you're talking about and really building off what Elle was saying there, bringing those numbers to them, that it is about our business culture, that it is about what we live every day. It is not that you can say, I do business here, and then there's this thing outside work, right? So we when we were looking at all the studies out there, they weren't talking about what's it like when it's together, when it's all one, because it really is all one. And that pay raise that Elle was talking about, when you see this amazing, so we looked at 18 to 29-year-olds. They said that if you can improve the inclusivity of your business, it's equal to a 14% pay raise.
Wow.
To 18 to 29-year-olds. Well, my friends, that is a huge return. So what is that telling you? That's saying, yes, we care about what we thought was outside work, at work. At work, we care about it. And I know Elle knows this number very well. 1 in 3 Black workers have considered a lawsuit because of the way they've been treated based on their identity or background. And for many folks, they'll say that number's a little low. I'll tell you, if you talk to a corner office or a boardroom, they don't want a number above 1%. So it's the awareness that we need to close the gap, and what are the things that can shake the tree so that they go, okay, all right, they are one. They know it's one in their heart. The champions know that, right? They know that it's one and the same. But how do we get the ones that they're trying to bring over to their camp so that they can work together on it internally?
Wow. And Elle, what have you found in all of this research? Is there anything that really stands out for you that many might be surprised by?
You know, I think there's a lot here that's interesting and puts data to maybe assumptions that we had, particularly around the value of ERGs and consistent programming. There's some great data points around the value of how leadership communicates to employees to help create that culture on a consistent basis. And as Richard Lui mentioned, the data around the numbers of folks who have considered legal action is really sobering, right? That means that something has been happening time and time again, or is substantial enough that people are considering not just leaving your company, but taking legal action. And that's a really high threshold that needs to be addressed. But to pick up on something, I think one of the most important things, and what I see as a practitioner working with companies who are grappling with this, is that DEI is a muscle, right? It needs to be exercised. So that feeling that a company is not inclusive, it's not in the big moments, right? It's not in the DEI training that you invested in or the launch of your ERG. It's in the fact that you are inviting colleagues to a dinner program during Ramadan, or you are creating things that are exclusive to people based on their beliefs or based on their responsibilities outside of work that akin to who they are. And so that's what most companies have a struggle with, right? How do you stay consistent every day in the interactions that employees have with their company in a way that says we center DEI, not just in the big moments? And that's the challenge for companies.
And I saw in the report, part of the report, it says 70% of workers say businesses are more productive when leaders use inclusive language.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, can you talk about that, Richard?
Isn't it amazing? I mean, Stacy and Elle, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, right? But the thing is, they're not using it, right? So it seems like, oh, if I just take my vitamin C every day, it's good for me. But many of us aren't taking the vitamin C. So this is as simple as a question that is, as using simple, inclusive language that we can feel more productive at work. And this is across all the groups. And speaking of all the groups, the purpose of this is also not to, just as in politics, when we talk about it, Stacy and Elle, you know, we see it as, oh, the black voter block. Well, there's no black voter block, right? There are at least 5, 6, 8, depending how you look at it, if you even want to group it that way. And the purpose of the study also is to show that intersectionality of Black workers, because it's not like, oh, you know, one person equals all people. You know, that's not true. And for that fact, you know, that's why I was just talking about younger Black workers and their view of inclusivity, which will vary over time. And, you know, and another thing is, well, what about men and women, right? And how they see inclusivity at work and the way that they enact it. And so hopefully we can empower the executive leadership to not see any group at work as just one group, and that they see all that we are individually as well. I mean, so to that point, for instance, the way that Black women engage in DEI, ERG, and BRG is by being part of programs and being part of the day-to-day practice. The primary reaction to Black men at work is that, well, let's make sure that we get it right and don't always don't forget that we've got some things that aren't working. So like DEI training, for instance, is one of the concerns, is that training's good if it's good.
Right.
It's not good if it's not good. It's not good if it's not addressing the reality. Don't sugarcoat stuff. So that was a difference between, for instance, Black men and Black women at work. And that we're trying to say, you know, this isn't the end all be all, right? This is just more of see the intersectionality in this group. It is so rich and complex. Don't go to one thinking you know all.
And along those lines, Elle, Richard talked about Black men, Black women. Was there a difference? I know we tend to, everyone has their own lens, right? Was there a difference when it came to age groups? Was there, is there any type of synchronicity when with the ages, or do they see things differently?
Yeah, we saw a lot of interesting splits across age groups, right? Particularly when you look at our newer workers, our younger workers who are just entering the workforce. They are much more likely to file a lawsuit. They are much more likely to, crave more involvement from leaders and more communication from leaders. They are more likely to assign a monetary value to an inclusive culture. And then when you look at some of our more seasoned workers, they are, they're a little less driven, but they feel that it's important for this to be part of culture, but they're not necessarily as driven to file a lawsuit per se, or be engaged in different ways in ERGs and BRGs. And so there's some interesting differences between age groups, certainly.
Yeah, and Richard, what about the employers? Um, what what are their justification, reasons, or lack thereof, lack of reasons thereof, for not embracing the E and I?
It's about, it's unfortunate, but it's about education and about the metrics. And if we can start to, for instance, in Davos, which is the Super Bowl of business, right? What are the number of folks that have faces like ours that are walking in the streets and down the conference halls? What are the number of understandings about our existence and what we may see work as? Because we're all individuals and we try our best, but we're not all cut from the same place. So I think that when we're talking about executive leadership, it's not for, in majority, I would say, it's not for fault of interest. It may be fault of education and data around this space. If you look at the panels that are discussed typically at these conferences at this level, you're not seeing the issue of inclusion or workers of color. And we need to, not that this is the end all be all, but as we look at what's happening in our society, we know now that business wants to engage, and they've done so in ways that we have never seen before. I mean, business has really leaned in the last 3 years. Is there an opportunity to do more? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think, Stacy, it is a lack of these kinds of conversations around tentpole information that they can take back and talk the language that they're talking between their executive leadership and their boardrooms. And we're trying to give them that vernacular. We're trying to give them the stuff to talk about so that they can get to the qualitative by giving them the quantitative along the way. Because we know this is about numbers, but we know this is not about numbers.
And Elle, there's the first meeting of a collaborative in the summer. Between now and the summer, before that meeting, what's going to be taking place? And then tell us a little bit about what to expect during that meeting.
Sure. Well, the collaborative is still being formed and pulled together by interested parties who have seen this data and said, you know what, we're all in. We want to do something about it. And so the work isn't stopping after the release of the report. There will be 7 reports that come out that cut this data across different demographic groups, which will allow us to get a deep dive into relevant groups that we can start to build solutions for, right? And so data is one thing. It's nothing if you're not using that data to create solutions. And so that's really what the goal of the collaborative is to continue having conversations. We've set up conversations with corporate leaders who are interested in the data and want us to walk them through it. We have set up plans to make sure that we are thinking about what the next steps are in terms of actionable solutions that are backed by this data, so that we're not just saying, hey, here's information. We're also saying, here's information and here are some ideas to put this into action for your organization. So that's really what the work of the next couple of months looks like as we build up that collaborative, and really what the future of this work looks like as a whole. We want to make sure that we are delivering relevant and interesting and helpful data and pairing that with solutions.
And so, and Richard, you did a documentary that tackles this. Tell us a little bit more about this documentary.
Yeah, the first documentary is related to the very topic of trying to bring us together It's coming out hopefully in 3 years. The first one was about caregivers, young caregivers that were Black, Latino, Native, Asian, and white, and they were age 18 to 24. That was about to show how we all care about the same stuff, family. The one that will address this idea culturally head on is called Model Minority, in that we have all been through this. Every single major community in America has gone through the idea that, oh, you're the best. Right. And then you were not. I mean, in the beginning of where we started, the documentary will dig into, it was our indigenous brothers and sisters that were seen as the model, because they were helping the new colonials. They were teaching them how to survive here in North America. And then they weren't. And then it was the enslaved Africans who were the model minority, because they took on the religion. They didn't fight back until they were emancipated. And then it was the indentured Chinese. They were the model until they weren't. Then it was the Irish. So that the idea is that we have this unfortunate shared experience of a good minority versus bad minority. And that good versus bad minority, as we live through it today, and we've been talking about it throughout, and I'm glad that you're mixing in all these things about culture and business together here, Stacy, because we cannot put them aside from each other.
Right.
And by addressing that idea of the good versus bad minority, it is insipid, and it leaks into what we do at work too. Not because we're trying to create division. It is just that it is there. It is this very idea that, and to that point, that was the first point of the study, is that there's an alarming divide about the perception of what we are versus the way others see us. So, like for instance, with Black workers, the perception that race and ethnicity would be the defining and limiting characteristic of who they are was double the rate of some other groups. Now, you're not seeing me then, right? You're not seeing me.
Yeah.
And so that documentary is about trying to see us better, to understand each other better. And the study is consistent with that as, we are this way. In this case, Black workers, they are saying we are this way, but are others seeing me this way? Are you seeing what I'm doing and what I live through every day? I walk through those work doors. And I hope that, at the end, there will be no end, because we're going to continue to do this, right, Elle? 2024.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That when we walk through the doors, they start to see, in this case, Black workers better, so that we can work together better, because that's what we're trying to do. Work better together at work so we can do better stuff.
Yeah. It sounds interesting. Looking forward to these documentaries. It should shed some real serious light, even more serious light on it. Elle, tell us too, Elle, about where folks can find information on the studies.
Sure. So we will be publishing the studies. We've got a series of 7 studies that will be put out, and we'll be talking about them loudly. I hope that folks will continue to keep an ear out and listen for those studies. We also have online platforms and spaces that people can go to read the studies and download them and learn a little bit more about them. I might pass it to Richard to give a little bit more information about the specific website that folks can go to.
Richard? APCO is doing all the work, so go to them. But it's prisca.org/inclusion at work. All letters are inclusion at work. And there you can download the latest, which is the Black workers study. So we're really excited. By the way, put on your reading glasses, because it's 80 pages long, but don't worry about it. For those who only have a second or two, just make it through the first 2 pages. And I think it'll open your eyes, because there's some big questions out there for folks in business, and it's what Elle brought up earlier. Why are we doing DEI? Yeah. What is ERG and BRG? Should we continue doing it? And as Elle started saying, once you see the stark reality of the way workers of color see DEI, BRG, and ERG in terms of retention and recruitment, for instance, right? That's brass tacks. You bet double down, right? You talk about going to Vegas and getting good odds. Well, start spending more and investing more, because you will get very large return based on what we learned by going through the study and getting the data. And that's what we're trying to say really up front. The advisory panel got together and said, let's ask the questions that CEOs want to ask, but sometimes are too afraid to.
Yeah. And obviously this is a very comprehensive, these are comprehensive studies, reports. You guys really dug into this. How long did it take to put together? What was it like putting this together?
Well, what did it feel like, Elle? The APCO team probably thinks it felt like 10 years, Stacy. But it's a year long that we've all been working together. There's a group of researchers which we list in the study, and Elle knows this. We really wanted to make sure, me as a journalist, they as experts in public relations and marketing and strategy, was that I wanted to feel like I could put it on a news show. So it had to be that strong. Wow. It had to be that credible. And the partners that are part of it, the way we brought the scientists together to do it, all of that was related to, would I put it on TV? Is it strong enough to put on TV? Because we're really picky when we start doing studies, for instance, politics, which nobody ever talks about politics, right? But when we get these studies, we got to get it right. Stacy, if you're going to quote something, people go, oh, who's that? Right. So it's been a year, and the scientists we have been talking with almost every single day. We want to get it right. We're not perfect. The language has to be just right as well. So our collaboration with APCO has been super important as we go through, how do we make sure that we're in community? And I can't underline that enough, as Elle was making. The difference about this particular report and survey is that we brought together expertises that generally are not part of stuff like this. Generally, you get it from community, or you get it from business, or you get it from academia, one of those three. But we brought in also journalism on top of that. So we have all four together from this. And I think what is really helpful is the community voice. It is essential to what we are doing and why it's important, and how we get the questions the right way, right? What's really of value to us from community, and then helping them understand what our voice is.
And again, before we close out, website again that folks can go and take a look at this.
Prisca.org / inclusion at work. Inclusion at work. Prisca, PRISCA.org. Wow.
Well, he's an author, journalist, documentary, and filmmaker. She is Elle Arlook, the head of equity and justice for the lead partner of this study, APCO. Richard and Elle, we really appreciate you joining the Black Press of America's Let It Be Known. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacy.
Everybody, thanks for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.